we live, Ms. Legault?
Camera's live.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And welcome. Everyone's looking resplendent for Pink Shirt Day, I see. Welcome to the Regional Services Committee meeting for February 24th, 2021. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge we're on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples. And what's the first item on the agenda, Ms. Legault?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item is approval of the agenda.
Have a mover? Seconder? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 2 is adoption of the Regional Services Committee minutes of January 27th, 2021. I do want to note 2 corrections. One is to the date on the header of page 1, correcting it to 2021, and correcting the chair to Director Salmon, not Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you. Director Stone, moved by Director Stone. Seconder, Director Marsh. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No business arising from the minutes, so public input period. And we do not have any participants for public input period today. So down to reports. Item R1 is a report from the Finance Division on the 2021 tax insert notice options for direction.
Thank you. Ms. Soldera, do you have some presentation for us?
Through the chair, just here to answer questions. I can give you a little brief rundown on some of the changes. We heard from the directors that more information on what was actually on the tax notice and the type of services CBRD provides should be on there. So we've added a new section called Understanding Your Tax Notice. Also, there's 3 options presented. One uses the tax rate per 100,000 as it has in previous years. One uses the chart from Schedule E, and I'm not sure if the copy that you have is in color, but it's important to note that it would be black and white in the tax insert. And the other uses the information from the chart, but in a dollar format so that it is potentially easier for people to read. So those are the 3 options that we have brought forward for your decision today.
Thank you, Ms. Soldera. I see Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in reading these, I, just note that we had this discussion earlier in the term, and, I guess we can go back and forth and discuss the merits of the different formats. I like the explanation of what's provincial and what's ours. I think for the important part of this, it's the distinction between the cost per 100,000 and the cost per average home. And I've been in front of the public before, and when that issue of the average cost per home, the general response that the community has when that's brought up is, well, that's not anywhere near what the cost per of my home or what my home is worth. That has no relevance to me, and now I have to go away and do math to figure out its actual impact. So the cost per 100,000 has been what's been used for a number of years. It's fairly self-explanatory. It shows the difference, and people can, if their house is worth 450,000, they can take the number and multiply it by 4.5, and it's pretty simple. I'm in favor of making sure we've got the information that explains what the provincial part of the bill is. But I really think that for consistency of and ease for our residents, that we stick with the cost per 100,000, and it's what we've been doing. Yes, there's changes from year to year depending on what the assessed value is, and that's something that I don't mind explaining to residents when when they have a $50 or $60 increase to their taxes over last year, but their house has gone up, $60,000 or $80,000, I don't mind having that discussion. So I'm inclined to stick with the status quo. I'm not prepared to make a motion. I'd like to hear what others have to say, but the system that we've had has worked for people in my community, and I'd like that option to be able to stay with that format for residents of Area F. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Stone, then Director Smith.
Yeah, just following on Ian's comments, like I understand the desire to be able to express to people that service provision is kind of like a cost per household. So so I get that, but I think that, like Ian just said, in my experience, it's been a lot easier to explain to folks what the impacts are when you have that per $100,000 number. And I believe that was sort of the decision we'd come to previously, but interested to hear other people, but based on my experience, I would be supporting the per 100,000 breakdown.
Thank you. Director Smith.
Thank you. I agree that the per 100,000 is a good way to go. This is our work, and this is what we came up with per 100,000. So I think it's important that it's what the CVRD Directors Board came to the end result, and not what BC Assessment has come to. They're two different jurisdictions, and we're responsible for our actions, and I think the 100,000 reflects that. I think that if you look at the Area B or Area A, it actually shows that there's a $10.44 per 100,000 decrease. And I think that's really important for people to see the decrease between 2020 and 2021, and then say, wow, look what has occurred at the CVRD. It reflects well on us. And so I support the 100,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Smith. Director Marsh.
Yeah, I'll, whatever the majority obviously wants, I'll go along with, but I actually like the second one where it has the graph that shows how little and how much for each function each home pays. And I think there's a lot of different ways of understanding information, and visual is one of them. And that one has two different visuals that would really, I think, would certainly help me. So, but whatever the board decides, of course, I'll go along with it, but that would be my preference, would be attachment B with the two graphs.
Thank you, Director Marsh. So I have Director Sebring, then McGonigal, and I'll put myself on the list as well. Director Sebring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For some reason, I can't get my computer to boot up, the one that I use to look at the agenda, so I don't have the three reports in front of me. I did read them earlier, so I can't remember if this was an option. And like Councilor or Director Marsh, I'm not particularly vested in this. I mean, as a municipality, it affects us less, but I'm just wondering whether it's an either-or scenario. Is there no way that we can just, as a throwaway line in the middle of that brochure, say, you know what, the average tax for the average home to CVRD this year is going to be this much, and here's how it breaks down per 100,000 in your electoral area. That way, to folks who don't think in terms of the 100,000, they've got the snapshot and they go, well, crap, that's not my house. Well, okay, then go to the 100,000 and figure it out. But does it have to be either or? Can we just throw a line in there? And I honestly can't remember if that was one of the options. And like I said, I'm still waiting for this computer's been trying to update for the last 40 minutes, and it's just not. My laptop is grinding away. It's driving me crazy. So anyway, that's just my input. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Sebring. If we discuss this long enough, you'll have a chance again. Director McGonigal.
Thank you very much. I'm inclined to go along with attachment A. It does have two graphs on there as well, explaining where the money comes from and where it goes, and with the explanation of what's provincially taken care of, I think that explains where the tax dollars go. Whether it's a electoral area or a municipality, you can see the functions in Lake Cowichan, for instance, which we participate in, and where and what that money goes towards. So I would be inclined to stay along attachment A as well.
Thank you. I have myself next, and then Director Wilson, and then Director Kuhn. So yeah, I think the issue I have with the way we've done it, option A, is that I think it's misleading in that the amount per 100,000 often goes down, even though our tax is going up. So in the example there, area A, it does show going from 211 to 201 per 100,000, and yet we know our taxes went up around 3% in area A. So it's sort of, to me, it's equivalent that you know, you've the column from a year ago was about 20% of your property that we're talking about, but then so this year it's like only 15% of your property the figure applies to. So it's just kind of a misleading for most people to look at the bottom line. That bottom line's gone down, and we assume that means taxes have gone down. So for me, I'd prefer either of the other two, and perhaps, as Ms. Solderis said, with it being black and white, the option B might not show up very well. So I think option C would be what I'd lean toward at this point. But we'll carry on. Next on my list, Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, there's pros and cons for all of them, obviously, but my preference is for option A, and I'm quite prepared to make a motion on that if we need to vote on it.
Okay, then I have Director Kuhn.
I second that. If Director Wilson has made that motion recommendation, I second the motion.
Okay, that's moved and seconded then. So I have next Director Kuhn.
I think to avoid any misunderstanding in the public, what we should do is we should explain that the actual taxes that they pay depend also on the value of their property, on the increase or decrease in the property value. Because if we don't do that, there'll be nothing but confusion. If we have one graph showing the cost per 100,000 and the other graph showing the cost per average home, and the average home value has increased over last year by, let's say, 10% or 5% or whatever, then obviously the taxes are different. And so the public are going to say, well, what do you mean? So here you show an increase and here you show a decrease. So I think we'll have to do a good job explaining that some of the actual amount of property taxes that they pay is not done by us, it's done by their property value. And I think that has to be pointed out. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Morrison and then Stone.
Thank you. I'll be brief. You know, I don't see Mr. Kieber on the line, but you know, I've had so many discussions with him about that percentage that always ends up in the newspaper, and it's just, you know, from a misleading perspective, that global percentage for the CVRD or for the electoral area is so misleading, depending on, like, it's really almost a nothing figure. The real figure is what shows up on the tax notice and the dollars and cents, and that's why I like the option A, and I'm fully prepared to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Stone, and then Martman.
Actually, I think what I was going to say has been said in the last two speakers. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Director Martman.
Well, I lean towards option A as well, but I was reflecting on what people have been saying, and I'm wondering if there's a ability to put a text box in there with an example, just saying, this is the average house price, and this is how you get to it when it's this much per 100,000. And you just put that in a little text box saying, this is how you calculate your actual property tax. And you actually could do it from the year before to this year and show it last year's. And maybe you can just use the director's property as an example. I'm joking.
Soldair, did you want to comment on that?
Absolutely, we can add whatever the directors wish. That is very similar to what Director Sebring suggested with including the cost per the average house, so we can show how we reach that cost and then have the breakdown per 100,000 if that is what the committee wishes.
Thank you. So Director Wilson, were you going to amend your motion?
Yeah, very, very quickly, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, the biggest problem, as a lot of directors have pointed out, that it's all tied in with the valuation of your house. And that's something that we have no control over whatsoever. The very fact that you bought your house 20 years ago for, let's say, 200,000, it's now worth 500,000, is not your fault. You bought it to live in. So there must, you know, it's always been a moot point as whether that's the best way of doing it. I personally don't think it is. Because you've got people who really can't afford it now because the house has gone up. So I would love to see a different way. However, we're stuck with what we want. Regarding what Director Martman just said there about working out a thing, I've got a pretty good spreadsheet about that, and I'm more than happy to send it to you if you want to look at it. I've tracked it since 2012. Works great.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Director Nicholson.
I don't have an opinion on the 100,000 versus the average home price, although for me personally, it's easier to think about an average home price. But I am concerned about how dense and small the type is getting on this brochure. Because, you know, I think the point is to make it easy for people to find the information. So I'm just wondering if we could shorten the chair's message, which seems to me very it seems to fit the moment, but maybe we could shorten it and perhaps add a little bit of if people are concerned about explaining the assessment issue, that might be a way of gaining a little bit of space, but I just think a little bit more blank space in general on the thing. So a good hard edit would be really helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think I saw Director Stone nodding about a shorter chair message. So Director Stone.
Just quickly, I am working with Mr. Schumacher, and he's been poking me about it. So I apologize to him for not having, to all of you for not having it ready for here. But it is a bit shorter and a bit more efficient with the words.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not sure we have a motion on the floor, and I was hearing consensus about trying to include something to clarify on the average home price issue. Ms. Soldair is nodding, so I don't know if we need to amend it or just take the option A with the understanding that we'll see a draft. Is that right, Ms. Soldair? Will we see a draft, or will it just go out after today?
Through the chair, based on the timing, I believe it will just go out after today with direction from the committee.
All right. Well, if there's no other, Director Marsh, is your hand up? Okay.
I'm just wondering through you to Ms. Soldera, does everyone have to be uniform, or could municipalities have a little different setup?
Through the chair, the municipal one is slightly different already. While there is no requirement that they all be uniform, staff does suggest that they be as uniform as possible, just to avoid potential for error.
Right. Okay. I was just thinking there might be a way that we could get the curve graph, and even though the area directors want the same one, but if that's a problem, no worries.
Ms. Soldair.
Just for the committee's information, we also do include a link to our website and encourage people to visit our website to see a copy of the Schedule E's.
Okay, thank you. And I saw Mr. Keever popped up as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, I was Director Marsh, the graph will not show the detailed information you're looking at because it's going to be all black and white versus the color. So it'll be a bit misleading. So as Ms. O'Dare said, it'll be on your website with a link, and people will get the color version and be able to explain it. So that, and staff, Ms. O'Dare is a little bit kinder than I am. We're strongly encouraging you to be consistent with one version for trying to prevent errors from happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keever.
Thank you. Director Morrison.
Ask the question, be called.
Okay, we'll call the question then. Everyone's clear. Should we hear it? Is it just option A? Is that the Sligo? Okay. All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So next item, Ms. Sligo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R2 is a report from Environmental Services Division regarding a couch and Lake Weir design project update, and this is for information.
Thank you. Do we have a presentation on that one? Staff? Ms. Miller?
Thank you. Good morning. No, we don't have a presentation. It's for information purposes, and you'll see two attachments with the report that identify and showcase some of the visuals that go with the work to date.
Thank you. Questions, Director Stone and Director Marsh?
Yeah, and I just wanted to reflect in there. It does talk about the Couch and Weir website, and there's videos there. I think I see Leroy on my screen in there. My eyes are getting bad. I don't have my glasses on like he does, but there's the backgrounders are there. All the updates are there. So I would really suggest that if we get inquiries from the public, just to really direct them there. It's a great website.
Thank you, Director Marsh.
I just wanted to say how much I love the walkway option. It's just beautiful. And I hope that's what we wind up with. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Kuhn and then Morrison.
Has it been decided that there's going to be a walkway, or is this just kind of a teaser?
Thank you. I did see it. That walkway is in the staff report, but Ms. Miller?
It's an option that we're exploring at this point. As we're not the owner, we don't have the final decision. So that will be up to the ownership group in terms of what is ultimately included in the capital works. And that will probably rely on things like the value of the funding available. So there's still lots in play. What we want to do is make sure that the design has the operability and the options as brought forward in terms of public consultation that the community is interested in. So it's a first step.
Okay, thank you. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I read as much of this as I could, and you know, familiar with a lot of it. I'm pleased to see the progress, and I know this is about design, but you're doing the other things as well as the shoreline levels and the likes. But my question is more towards that engagement piece, because you know, we have a fair number of seasonal residents and people that haven't had the regular visits from the local groups and weren't around during you know, the last election, so to speak. And there's a I wouldn't even call them a core group, but there's a significant number of waterfront property owners that haven't yet seen the right presentation to help them to understand that in January, when we're having you know, that atmospheric river flowing through here, and water levels are as high as they ever are, and the Weir's, you know, 8 or 10 feet below the surface of the water, they still think adding 70 centimeters to the Weir height is going to flood their property. So where are we at on that? You know, I'm almost afraid to say, but that almost one-on-one education piece for the waterfront property owners that don't yet understand that a 70 centimeter increase to the weir height isn't going to flood their properties above and beyond the normal winter mean water levels.
Yeah. Sounded like a question, Ms. Miller.
Yep.
Thank you. Through the chair to the director, great question, and obviously something that we have been struggling with for years in terms of being able to communicate effectively what the potential impacts might be. I'm going to turn it over to Leroy to sort of talk a little bit about what we're thinking about in terms of the next steps, because one is the communications with regards to the weir and the public input in terms of the weir design. The other is really around the concern of the property owners with regards to the impact on the foreshore area. And so I know that Leroy has spent quite a bit of time with folks on his website through Leroy's Corner, but also we are now expanding the communication to address shoreline work. So if I can allow Leroy to make a few comments, that would be appreciated.
Yes, please. So Mr. Van Weeren.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair, and Kate for the introduction. Yeah, so communication has been and continues to be a challenge, which is one of the reasons we created the project website with questions and answers and opportunity for understanding. One of the key next steps is to move into final design on the weir, and our plan is to share that opportunity with the public. Similarly with what we did in December with the preliminary design, is have a virtual meeting on that subject. And those types of questions do come up, and we'll have more of our modeling finalized to do exactly what you talked about, Director Morrison, and that is the understanding of the high winter water levels and what impact the new weir would have on those levels. So we're going to do our best to explain that. The second part is the shoreline assessment piece, where we're trying to understand the impact of a new weir on the perimeter of the lake. And that modeling and work is, I would say, essentially just started. We're getting a solid database underneath us right now. And we'll use that database and the modeling and the design of the new weir to really nail down the answer of the true impact we're going to have, not only with respect to flooding, but with respect to people's shorelines and waterfront properties. And so one of our plans is to create an education type of package to talk to folks about what we mean by a high water mark, what we mean by a natural boundary, what we mean by a shoreline, what we mean by all the different, things we talk about with transects and vegetation and line geomorphology. And so those of us close to that work understand it, but the general public, we think, needs a pretty good understanding of those bits and pieces. Again, later this year or early next year, go back to the public and talk about the results of the shoreline assessment work. And so those are going to be a couple of good opportunities. And our thinking is that perhaps about a year from now, we'll be out of the pandemic and may, in fact, be able to have and allow for an open house or a public forum, but that is yet to be determined. So, yeah, we understand the importance of communication, and we're, trying our different angles to make that work for us. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I have Director Kuhn and then Director Smith.
Yeah, I presume there'll be a fresh look at the rule curve as well.
Leroy?
Yes, as part of the water use plan that was developed in 2018 with CBRD and partners, and with the proposal for the new weir height, there's also a proposal for a new roll curve. And so that was a proposal, and we'll use that proposal as a starting basis. and then we'll do some adjustments or recommendations accordingly. And so some people think we should start, holding back water sooner, and others would differ. So yes, we are going to have a look at the road curve.
Thank you. Director Smith.
Yes, my question is to staff. Can you just remind us where the communication costs are coming out of for communication? Is it coming out of the WEIR grant, or is it coming out of a different area? Thank you.
Would like to take that one.
I can address that, Mr. Chair. The entirety of the costs for this program are being borne by the grant itself. So there is no requisition dollars or any impact on any other organizational unit to cover those costs. So we're working with a communications company, obviously coordinating with our own communications group, but the work has largely been driven by an external communications company funded by the program and in its entirety. And as we go forward, and one of the things that Mr. Van Vuren just alluded to is this the reality of the COVID situation and the need for us to be somewhat more tactical in our communications approach is that the funder has been very, very graceful and very flexible with us with our ability to adjust the proposal and the value of certain components of it to take into consideration changing conditions, either up or down. So that's been effective, and we're just finalizing the specifics of the grant utilization for the next year and a half. So that's been allocated there as well.
Good, thank you, Ms. Miller. Any further questions? Looks like not. Okay, so that was just for information. Thank you. So we will move along to the next item. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R3 is a report from the Environmental Services Division on the Cowichan-Coxsila flood mapping. And the proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board, 1, that the updated flood maps for the Cowichan-Coxsila floodplain prepared by Northwest Hydraulic Consultants in January 2021 be accepted. 2, that staff develop a floodplain management bylaw for the Cowichan-Coxsila floodplain. 3, that staff send updated Cowichan-Coxsila floodplain mapping to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure and request that any future work in the area be coordinated with the Cowichan Flood Management Working Group. And 4, that the lower Cowichan-Coxsila River Integrated Flood Management Plan be updated in light of the new information.
Thank you. And I see Mr. Moore. I assume you have something?
Mr. Chair, no, we don't have a presentation, but we're available for questions, should there be any.
Okay, thank you. So I have Directors Morrison, Smith, and Wilson. Director Morrison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a question directed through to Ms. Miller, and I have this really vague recollection of in the report. This recollection isn't vague. The mention of the function that's in place for funding this. The vague recollection is that that when this function was created, that the service area is includes a lot more properties than just the lower Cowichan-Coxsila area. And what I'm referring to is I think there's parts of area F and I that are in the upper reaches of the watershed that are contributing to the to this function. So I guess my first question is that an accurate assessment, and is that anticipated to remain the same over time? And that would lead to another question another day, but is that a fair assessment?
Ms. Miller.
Thank you. Through you to the director, Mr. Chair. That is correct. The function is a watershed-based function for the Cowichan watershed. It does not include the Coxsila, which is somewhat challenging for us given the co-joined floodplain in the lower area. But yes, it is a function that electoral areas F, I, E participate in. I think a tiny little bit of D, but not entirety of D, just a portion of it. North Cowichan, the city of Duncan also contribute. It's a fairly small service function, which relies largely on grant money. So.
All right, thank you. Director Smith.
Thank you. My question to staff is, are we moving this information into our harmonized and modernized official community plans for electoral areas as this is coming to light and more information is brought forward?
Thank you. Ms. Miller?
Thank you. Through you to the director. At this point, there is no floodplain bylaw for the CVRD portions of the floodplain area, which is why you see in Mr. Moore's staff report the recommendation that a bylaw be developed, which would then be included in the modernized OCP documents. So that's the first step. It's there right now as a reference for planners and others to take into consideration, but there's no regulatory framework that is aligned with it at this point in time.
Thank you. I saw Ms. Sherrill pop up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add that the floodplain management bylaws will be coming forward to the Electoral Area Services Committee, likely within the next couple of months. And once those bylaws are adopted, they'll be used by our building officials in the inspection and building permit process. And certainly the mapping that's been developed through Ms. Miller's group will be used to inform our long-range planning processes through the MOCP project.
Great, thank you. So I have Director Wilson and then Nicholson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions really, and mainly to do with cost. And let's face it, this has to be done. There's no doubt about that. But I don't see in any of the reports that I've gone through any kind of costing as to what this is going to be coming. And one of the things that Ms. Miller just said there, which kind of made me ask even more, which said this is a small service function relying on grant funding. So do we have enough money, or is grants going to be coming forward? We don't know about grants. So where's the money coming from, and how much is this going to cost?
Ms. Miller.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the director, it's an excellent question and something that we raised at the time. The maximum requisition established by the bylaw was 150,000 or the greater than figure, which is really not very much when you take into consideration the internal organizational cost and the staffing. So it really leaves very little residual for any works of note. We have been incredibly lucky, and I really acknowledge the partnership of our provincial and federal partners in funding the vast majority of the work. We are also in the midst of ongoing discussions with our other partners with regards to things like, and you'll see later on in your agenda, developing an integrated asset management plan and strategy for the dikes as a network, and then ultimately developing an ongoing flood management in terms of not infrastructure dikes per se, but ongoing sediment management. So we're likely going to be bringing forward a staff report later on this year with regards to recommendations about sediment management and the costs that are attributed to it. And so we may be asking to reopen and look at this function and bylaw just to make sure it has the resources that it may require if we did not have funding. At this point, we are updating on a 10-year cycle if there are no major issues a forecasted update to the flood mapping, which is our responsibility as a CDRD under the function. And the cost for this work is in the region of $500,000. So we're trying to put money away to do that or to leverage other partnerships, but based on the current requisition level, it is clearly not enough. And if there were any major events, we would have to look at alternative mechanisms to fund those.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ms. Miller. Quick follow-up, please, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so basically, what I'm asking again, is how much have we spent so far, and are we putting stuff away? Basically, are we building up any kind of reserve as well? And I am concerned about costs here, obviously, because if you are going to be coming back to us in, say, 6 months' time and saying, well, we didn't get the grant and we haven't got this, then it could be quite a significant jump. From what I'm hearing so far, and that's going to be my major problem. What kind of funds do you? And this is an open-ended question. I know it's very difficult to answer. What kind of sense do you have as far as grant funding is concerned? Do you think there's enough there, or is there? Do you think anybody's going to be giving us anything?
I think it again through you to the director. Flooding is one of the largest costs to the federal government and to property owners in Canada. It is kind of a number one impact of climate change and instability of our communities. And so if there were a major flood in the Duncan area, it would affect very substantially the economic heart of this region. And I think that puts it up as a very high priority. I think based on the initial flood mapping that we did in 2009, we were able to secure over $25 million in infrastructure and flood protection works. Our funders expect that we will maintain that infrastructure and that we will not let it fall into disrepair. And so that's an ongoing cost. However, I think that with the stimulus funding that is flowing, we have been in a very positive position in terms of grant money to date. That may change in the years to come, where the federal and provincial governments have said, we've given you funding to do the strategic planning, we've given you funding to build necessary infrastructure. We will not continue to give you funding to repair infrastructure that you should be maintaining through your own financial system, which is why we're going to be looking at it through the lens of asset management, developing a more structured in communications with our partners, a more structured financial policy that goes with that. And depending on those outcomes, we will come back and make some recommendations about either the level of resources that we can put away or changing the structure itself. Right now, with the level of resources that we have at hand, we have managed to year over year put a little bit of money away in anticipation of updates, et cetera, but it is very minor in the overall cost profile for this program itself, particularly when we start to look at potential flood management in the river bottom area, as well as in Lake Cowichan and what the impacts there may be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Miller.
Thank you. So I have Director Nicholson and then Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you. My question was answered, but I just want to say that I am really happy that this work is being done and it's very timely. I also recall a few weeks ago we talked about putting in a grant for the Chemainus River flooding issue there, and I think I mentioned at the time that I would really appreciate a workshop that provided a good overview of the flood management program that we have. And so I am wondering how I can make sure that that happens sooner rather than later. So I guess I do have a question.
Ms. Miller.
Thank you. Great question again. I just had a preliminary discussion yesterday with corporate services with regards to scheduling workshops, those sorts of things. And so I'll make sure that we add that to the list. Right now, with regards to the Chemainus, we're still in a waiting pattern and building the relationships with the various communities so that we are coordinated. There is a lot going on right now in the Chemainus. We want to make sure that we're not tripping over each other. So we are anticipating hearing about that funding program sometime hopefully before the beginning of March, but it's coming up very quickly here. We will be releasing an RFP in anticipation of that, hopefully later on this week. And we will have a full briefing on some of the issues there. So I will coordinate with Legislative Services to make sure that we put that more, provide an opportunity for more discussion and strategic planning with regards to the flood mapping work that we're doing and some of the alternative flood mitigation programs.
Thank you. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to move the recommendation, and it was a very good report. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So we'll move to the next item, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R4 is a report from the Environmental Services Division, FCM Asset Management Program grant application under the Dike Asset Management Plan. And the proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that a grant application in the amount of up to $200,000 be submitted to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program to support development of a collaborative asset management plan for the Cowichan River Dike system on behalf of the CVRD and its partners.
Thank you. Do we have any staff presentation on this one? No? Okay, so I saw some hands. Questions, Director Yanni DiNardo.
Once again, I was just going to move the recommendation.
Second, Director Wilson? Yes. Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, and, moving on, Ms. Legault.
There's no further business items on the agenda, so it's if you'd like to take a 10-minute recess before question period.
Yes, take 10 minutes and back here at 10:28, please. Thank you. Just because I said it would be under an hour.
Camera's live.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. So did we receive any questions, Ms. Legault?
There were no submissions.
Nothing for question period. Okay, thank you. So
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded.
Call the question. You're under an hour.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
59 minutes, Mr. Salmon. Well done.
Good, everyone.
Thanks. We'll see you all at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
See you at 1 o'clock.
Aaron, could you give me a quick call, please?
Yep.
Thank you.